Won't You Be My Neighbor this morning. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Won't you be my neighbor? Mr. Rogers. Art, I almost asked if I could borrow your cardigan and wear it, but I didn't want to mess it up. I'm sure we're all familiar with Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Raise your hand if you've seen Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Everybody that's older, none of the kids. Okay, how many of you kiddos have seen, what's the Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood? Did you know that's a spin-off of this show? Yeah. Man, learn something every day. This is why you come to church, guys. No. Fred Rogers had this show from 1968 to 2001. That's how long this show aired. He had 31 seasons. And I tried to look it up and see where that lands within like the longest running TV programs. And apparently everybody thinks NFL Sunday Fox on football is a TV program. I don't know, consider it, but it was really hard. I couldn't find it, but it's up there. And so it went for a really long time. It was a great show. And it taught some great lessons in every episode. And most of the episodes involved around being neighborly. And I remember watching it as a kid. That was one of my main shows I used to watch. And so it would always teach us something. We're going to play a game this morning. So I need everybody to be attentive. I'm going to give you the name of a famous TV character from a show. And I'm going to see if you can tell me who their neighbor was, okay? All right. So the first one is, Barth, Jerry Seinfeld. Anybody know who his neighbor was? Kramer. Yep, that crazy-looking guy. I've never seen Seinfeld. I've seen maybe 1 or 2 episodes. Okay, what about this next one? We've got the Flintstones. Who were the Flintstones' neighbors? The Rubbles. Yep. Okay. What about this next one? Ricky and Lucy Ricardo. Fred and Ethel. Do you know their last name? Come on, Rhonda. Mertz. I might have said that wrong. But Fred and Ethel Mertz. Okay. What about this next one? Tim and Jill Taylor. Who was their neighbor? No, not Al.
Yeah, you only see from here up.
His character has an interesting name, only because it's the same name for his first and last name, which is I found interesting. It's Wilson. Apparently his character's name is Wilson Wilson. So that's his first and last name. I don't know. I was like, this can't be, but everything I looked had it Wilson Wilson. So, okay, what about this one? Friends, Monica and Rachel. Joey and Chandler. Okay. What about this one? The Winslows from Family Matters. Barth. Steve Urkel. All right, one last one. Kiddos, you should be able to get this one if you've seen it. Patrick technically is not a neighbor how we would define Squidward, though, is. It goes SpongeBob, Squidward, Patrick. I thought Patrick and Squidward were on either side of SpongeBob because I had both of them. And I was like, I'll do some research. I'm glad I did because I was wrong. So it's not hard to tell. We did a really good job, obviously, of these famous TV neighbors. But this morning in our text, we're going to look and we're going to find an expert in religious law who had a hard time knowing who his neighbor was. So, if you will, if you have a Bible with you this morning, we're going to be in Luke 10. We're going to be in Luke 10, and we're going to be starting in verse 25. So if you will turn there with me, that would be great. All right. So I'm going to read through this account real quick, and then we're going to break it down a little bit. So if you're there, I'm in Luke 10, and I'm going to be starting in verse 25. It says this. Now, an expert in religious law stood up to test Jesus, saying, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" He said to him, What is written in the law? How do you understand it?" The expert answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." Jesus said to him, "You have answered correctly. Do this and you will live." But the expert, wanting to justify himself, said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers, who stripped him, beat him up, and went off, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, but when he saw the injured man, he passed by on the other side. So to a Levite, when he came up to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan who was traveling came to where the injured man was, and when he saw him, he felt compassion for him. He went up to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring olive oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, "Take care of him, and whatever else you spend, I will repay you when I come back this way." Which of these 3 do you think became a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? The expert in religious law said, "The one who showed mercy to him." So Jesus said to him, "Go and do the same." So what we're seeing here this morning in the story is an expert in the law wanted Jesus to basically draw a circle around who was his neighbor. He wanted that defined, right? He wanted Jesus to explain who was in and who was out. That's what was his goal. And I think deep down, we all like to define something like that. Who is our neighbor? Because many of us think, like I had for our example, our neighbor is really someone who lives next door to us. That's usually our first idea of what a neighbor is. And on top of that, maybe it's the people who are close to us we consider neighbors. But that's not what we're talking about here. This is not what Jesus was talking about for a definition of neighbor. So let's look at what God says neighbor is. So Leviticus 19:18, God says this, is on the screen for you, says, "You must not take vengeance or bear a grudge against any of your people, but you must love your neighbor as yourself." So here his definition is what our definition is. Our people, who we may consider our neighbor, the people who live next to us, the people sitting here, our friends. That's one of the definitions, which is a good one. Your neighbor is someone you know, the people close to you. But in Leviticus 19:34, so a little farther down, God also says this: "The resident foreigner who lives with you must be to you as a native citizen among you. So you must love the foreigner as yourself, because you are foreigners in the land of Egypt." These are people we don't know. A foreigner would have been what? A foreigner. They wouldn't have been part of their society. They would have been someone from the outside coming in. Someone outside of our group of friends, our relatives, our neighbors, who Jesus or God is saying is our neighbor as well. And that's who we need to be acting as a neighbor. You see, church, a neighbor is anyone you can be what? Neighborly to, okay? They don't have to be your physical neighbor for you to be neighborly to them. It can be anybody. Anyone who has a need that God places in your path. That is who a neighbor can be to you. Now, this man was not his neighbor in the sense of we think of neighbor. This Samaritan and this guy, they weren't neighbors. The man on the side of the road who was beaten was a Jew, and the man who stopped was a Samaritan. And I can promise you they probably didn't know each other, okay? And I say that because Jews and Samaritans, they were enemies. They did not associate with each other. They thought the other one was the lowest of the lows. They didn't have anything to do with each other, okay? They hated each other. You see, it would be a lot like a Kansas State Wildcat coming upon a Kansas State Jayhawk, or Kansas Jayhawk, right? They wouldn't do anything. They wouldn't help each other, normal sense, right? Or maybe a Chiefs fan coming up on a Broncos fan. They wouldn't associate with you. They're enemies. No. I planned this before I realized y'all were playing each other this week, so it kind of worked out. This Samaritan church set all of their cultural and racial differences aside here. He set all of the bitterness and hatred from the past and stopped and helped. And we're going to learn because that's what you should do. Let's look again at verse 34 through 36. It says this, he went up to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring olive oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, take care of him, and whatever else you spend, I will repay you when I come back this way. Which of these 3 do you think became a neighbor to the man who fell in the hands of the robbers? So, what does it take to be a neighbor? We're called to be neighborly, okay, right? And anybody can be our neighbor, but how do we do it? What does it take to be neighborly? And that's what we're going to look at. And I've got 4 things quickly this morning to share with you on how you can be more neighborly. The first thing is it takes compassion. You have to have compassion, okay? Verse 33 again says this, but a Samaritan who was traveling came to where the injured man was, and when he saw him, he felt compassion for him. Now, compassion doesn't mean that you feel sorry for someone. It actually means you are motivated with a passion to do something. Okay? Let me tell you, people in need, they don't want you to feel sorry for them. They just want the help. They just want to see you love on them. Right? That's what they are craving. They want to see that you care, not because you feel bad for them, but because you see that you can help them in a way. And the Samaritan man did something like this. All right, they're real quick, so if you're taking notes, you better be quick. Number 2, it takes contact. Okay? Verse 34 again says this. It says, he went up to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring olive oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. It takes contact. Do you think he bandaged his wounds with his robot he has traveling beside him, where he doesn't have to touch him? No, he had to physically touch him. You had to physically have contact with people. This man, the Samaritan, had more good reasons not to help this man than the other 2 in the story that passed by. He had more than enough reasons not to help him. But he didn't let obstacles stop him. He went to him and he physically touched him to help him. Physically touched him. All right, number 3. It takes care. It takes enough care to actually act. We all may think about helping someone. We could think about it all day, but if we don't actually act, are we really doing anything with what God's put in front of our faces? Verse 34, we see the Samaritan caring a lot, right? He's bandaging him. He's putting him on his horse. He's taking him to an inn, right? He's showing that care. He actually did something, church. And he didn't do something beyond his means. I want you to catch this. He didn't do something beyond his means. He helped in a way that he was able to. Not all of us are blessed maybe financially. We can't just give a bunch of money. But we can volunteer. We can help in many different ways. And I'm not saying for you to go make yourself homeless so someone else isn't homeless. It's figuring out how you can help by what means you have available to yourself and using those means to help somebody else. And that's different for all of us. All right. Lastly, it may cost you something, okay? I will say it will cost you time, and it may cost you money to be a good neighbor. This man, the Samaritan man, he paid 2 silver coins, which what we learned last week was kind of 2 days' wages. A silver coin was about a day's wage. So that's 2 days' wages. I don't know about you, but I can't imagine giving up 2 days of my wage to somebody else. That's hard. But that's what this man did. That's a big deal for the Samaritan to do this. See, we don't know what it might cost us, and that's the unknown. We can guarantee it might cost us some time, but we don't know the other variables that what it will cost us until we're in the moment, do we? And you have to know that going in. But we may not know what's going to cost us, but we know these 2 things. Jesus said for us to do it, and we know it will be worth it, church, if we do it. I wanted to close with a little something on the little lighter side, so it's a little kind of story. So a man fell into a pit, and he couldn't get himself out. A pessimist comes by and says, oh, you're never going to get out of that pit, okay? Then a Democrat comes along the way, and he wanted to tax the pit for some reason. A Republican came along and wanted to throw the Democrat in the pit with them. A lawyer came along and wanted to take them all to court. A Scientologist came along and said, you only think you're in a pit. A fundamentalist stopped by and said, you deserve that pit. An optimist stopped and said, well, things could be worse. I mean, you're just in a pit. And then Jesus, seeing the man, took him by the hand and lifted him out of the pit. I share that because we need to identify with somebody in this story. And who we should be identifying with is Jesus. I know many of us want to be identified with the Republican and push someone in a pit with somebody else, but we shouldn't, right? No. Church, Jesus taught that anybody can be your neighbor. Anybody. They don't have to live next to you. They don't have to be in your group of friends. Anybody can be. We need to be willing to listen to the leading of the Holy Spirit when we come in contact with all people. Maybe you know them, maybe you don't. Maybe it's an opportunity for you to get to know someone better. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just a fleeting, you just planting a little seed and you may never see that person ever again. But God has a plan, and we have to be willing to listen to that plan. Anyone in need can and should be your neighbor.